Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. I am your host, the Deuster. It is a bone-chilling 9 degrees outside at Soggy Bottom this morning. And instead of getting out and braving the elements, I'm going to try to stay inside today and maybe share a few stories with you while I drink on a good old hot cup of coffee and keep warm. Have any of you ever heard of Old Green Eyes of Chickamauga? I have had several requests to do some research on this, and I kind of put it off, had other things to do. But I did. I finally looked up a few things on it, and it is a quite interesting story. Like I said, have you ever heard of the Old Green Eyes of Chickamauga? While several members of the paranormal community probably have, there's a lot that probably have not. And I want to share the story with you of what may be Georgia's own Civil War Bigfoot. The Old Green Eyes is a legendary creature, according to numerous ghost hunters and tourists through the years, that still haunts the enormous national park known as Chickamauga Battlefield. I have been to this battlefield myself. It is massive. There's a lot of death and destruction there. I didn't see anything out of the ordinary, but that don't mean it wasn't there. And Old Green Eyes isn't the only apparition seen roaming the haunted grounds, but he's certainly the most famous. As you can imagine, Civil War battlefields are some of the most haunted places on earth. With so much death, destruction, and sorrow in one area, it's no surprise that restless spirits still wander the land. Chickamauga Battlefield in northwestern Georgia, close to the Tennessee state line, was the scene of one of the bloodiest battles of the war, and second only to Gettysburg. The Civil War was approaching its end in 1963 when Union troops captured Chattanooga, with their eyes set on Atlanta to the south. General William Rosecrans was the Union commander who led the charge into Georgia in September of that year, but he met violent opposition along Chickamauga Creek from the Confederate troops led by General Braxton Bragg and General James Longstreet. The two-day battle ended with the Confederate Army pushing the Union Army back into Tennessee, but sadly, 37,000 soldiers from both sides were lost in the battle. Winning the Battle of Chickamauga was a much-needed morale boost for the Confederate Army, but their victory would be short-lived, as Union General Sherman eventually took the reins of the Union Army, and driving his bloodthirsty troops south to Atlanta, he left a trail of death and destruction in its path. Years later, numerous people encountered strange things going on at the old battlefield grounds. Some would hear the sounds of gunshots at night, or of soldiers marching, moaning, and crying. This would stand to reason, as the battlefield is believed to be filled with makeshift graves containing both Union and Confederate soldiers. After the battle, the corpses of many soldiers, both Union and Confederate, were left lying in the field for weeks on end, and were eventually buried in unmarked graves on the battlefield itself, as well as in the neighboring woods and surrounding thickets. One famous ghost who is said to wander the battlefield is the Lady in White, who is searching for her husband. We will do another little episode dedicated strictly to the Lady in White. But the Old Green Eyes is the best-known apparition, and according to witnesses, has appeared in two different forms. Some believe Green Eyes is a soldier whose head was blown off during the battle, and now wanders Chickamauga looking for his body. The second version of the story is that Old Green Eyes is a strange, otherworldly creature, half man, half beast. Old Green Eyes wanders the Chickamauga battlefield on two legs and has long, stringy hair down to his waist. But he also has glowing green eyes and huge jaws with two sharp fangs that are sticking out. It is believed this version of Green Eyes comes from a Native American legend from long before the Civil War, as there were some reports of Green Eyes wandering among the dead at Snodgrass Hill shortly after the Battle of Chickamauga. Now, if you're not familiar with Chickamauga, just think of it as Gettysburg of Georgia, only much bigger. Chickamauga is actually a Native American word meaning river of death, and during this bloody battle, it lived up to its name. The Union Army was trying to capture Chattanooga, which was a major rail center at the time, but the Confederate Army managed to drive them back, but not before 37,000 soldiers died for the cause. The story I'm going to talk to you today happened one night when a local boy, late for his date, took a shortcut to the battlefield to get to his girlfriend's house. The road he chose was a narrow 2-lane road that cut straight through the heart of the battlefield. It had been raining all day and appeared to be tapering off. It was foggy, and a thick and eerie mist hung over the battlefield like ghostly fingers. The park had already closed for the night, and there were no other cars in sight. Due to the fog, the road was almost impossible to see, but as this young man had used this shortcut many times before, he knew it like the back of his hand. Driving down the main road, he peered into the swirling mist and was able to make out the distant headlights of a car approaching in the distance. As it drew closer, he noticed it was unlike any car he had ever seen before, as the headlights appeared to glow from a strange greenish color. As the car drew closer and closer, he noticed those green lights were burning brighter than any headlight he had ever witnessed. And what was even weirder was the fact that they seemed to bounce up and down and weave from side to side as if the car itself were riding on some type of springs. The young man flashed his lights and tapped his horn, hoping the driver of the car would see him. As the mystery car got closer and closer, the driver appeared to swerve further into his lane, and he laid on the horn. As thoughts ran through his mind, he wondered if the other driver was drunk or otherwise impaired. It was then he noticed something odd about those green lights. There were no visible beams shooting out from them, and they appeared to be two floating orbs. At that point, he realized that they looked like eyes. He again frantically blared his horn again as the green lights drew closer and closer. Just before the two vehicles passed each other, the driver of the other vehicle suddenly swerved in his lane. Reacting quickly, the young man spun the steering wheel in the opposite direction, and he lost control. His truck flew off the road and into the battlefield grounds, swallowed by darkness. He slammed into a tree, and the world around him turned black. When he came to a few minutes later, the battlefield was deadly silent, except for the hissing sounds coming from beneath the crushed hood of his truck. The headlights were smashed, and the only visible light came from the bright stars above. It was then he saw the green lights again, sitting silently in the darkness, as if they were observing him. He watched in awe as the lights floated closer and closer toward his truck. The battlefield was silent, and he listened in vain for any sounds from the other vehicle. He quickly realized that it couldn't have been a car that he had seen, but what was it? Suddenly the lights disappeared, and he began to tremble with fear for the first time. "Who's out there?" he called out, but no one answered. It was then he heard a rustling sound against his truck and peered out the window into the darkness. It was then he was able to make out the shape of a large, shadowy figure as it circled his truck. His first thought that it was a large man because it shuffled about on two legs. But as his eyes adjusted, he could see its hair was long, right down to its waist, and it made a horrible moaning sound, the saddest sound he had ever heard. All of a sudden, the mysterious creature disappeared, and the night was quiet again. "Is anyone out there?" he yelled, but there was no answer. After a long pause, he slowly reached for the door handle with shaking fingers and was about to get out of the truck. It was then that something pounced upon the hood of his truck. Looking out through the cracked windshield, he could easily determine that what he had seen was no man. It was a beast, with long, dirty hair and huge, mangled jaws from which two long, sharp fangs jutted out. And it had two burning green eyes, and appeared to be fueled by some other evil that he couldn't even begin to comprehend. He tried to scream, but found himself mute, hypnotized by those glowing green eyes. As the creature and he stared at each other in silence, the battlefield began to transform around them. The darkness gave way to a strange green glow, and there was no road, no cars, and no monuments. Instead, he found himself surrounded by smoke, fire, scorched grass, and the charred remains of warfare. The sickening stench of burning flesh filled his nostrils, and at his feet were piles of bodies in blue and gray uniforms, drenched equally in blood. Some were missing arms, some missing legs, and even the heads were missing on some. Everywhere there were low and agonizing moans of pain and death. Suddenly a curtain of darkness fell upon the battlefield, and he could hear a car horn behind him. At this time, the creature leapt off the car hood and disappeared into the night. A couple of rangers ran down the hillside and asked, "Are you all right?" The young man asked, "Did you see that animal that attacked me, the one with the green eyes?" The two rangers looked at him strangely and then replied, "That's a serious bump you've got on your head, son. You must be seeing things." "But something jumped on my truck," he yelled. "I saw it." The rangers never found any evidence of any creature, and even when daylight broke and his truck was towed away, not even a single animal print could be found. Fearing ridicule, he soon gave up his argument about the creature, fearing that people would think he was crazy. And as time passed, other folks insisted that they too had spotted the mysterious green eyes while driving through the park at night. I don't know if this story is true or not. I just wanted to relay it to you. I did find it while I was searching the internet. And if you like this story, like my channel, if you don't mind, subscribe to it, share it among your friends, give me a like, come back and visit, and I'll be sharing some more stories with you. Again, this is the Dooster with Cryptids and Critters Paranormal. Have a good day, and thank you for watching.